Yesterday, TYT announced their candidate, or rather the Justice Democrat-backed candidate that they were supporting. And after hearing about her, because there were a lot of people who were speculating it was either going to be Cenk or Anna, the two hosts of TYT, there was a possibility one of them would be the person who would be supported. Now, I have no quarrels necessarily with um, their chosen person because on their website, she seems to be very much in line with the positions that I have and with what I feel a majority of those who back TYT or watch TYT would support. The problem is that we also had Pat Harris and De Leon who were running in this race. Effectively, what this means is that, in my view, we're likely to see a split of the vote. And that's kind of what they didn't seem to understand when it came to a bit of the negative reception this received. Now, I would think ideally they would all say, okay, well, as much as we have 10 or 20 people that would want to do this, let's go behind the first guy who jumped in and let's make sure he has support. Now, while I still would prefer Harris just due to the fact that he was in the race before she was, I'm not opposed to either one of them. I would ideally go for whoever seems to have the biggest thing going for them, and currently he's out of that position. But really, I'm in favor of really anyone in that primary that isn't Feinstein, because I think that her tenure is riddled with inactivity. Um, she has not done anything for the state. Bought out anti-Sanders and people who, again, identify with progressives. I just don't understand where it made sense to them to go and have someone else come in. And I'm aware that, this person is now backed by the extent of their machine and those who are in favor of TYT. I get that. They're coming in with a bit of an edge on other third-party people. But one thing that hasn't been lost, one way or the other, no matter if you were for Feinstein or against her, and I'll admit this to you in a matter of seconds, there is an uphill battle no matter who you run when it comes to this race. We're talking about someone with name recognition across the state. A lot of these people you haven't heard of before, haven't heard about ever, and the same thing is applicable to really every candidate with the exception of De Leon, and that's what's so disappointing about not having one of those two hosts on TYT try to get the seat. Because theoretically, if they've been as notable for as long as they have, I can't see where they can't go off of just their recognition in terms of just trying to make the effort. And it's funny, if you go back and watch some of their coverage of last year's presidential election, there were many rationales and reasons made for Trump and Clinton getting the nominations of both the Republican and Democratic Party. And one of those that was shared between the two of them was likability. Or not likability, forgive me. Name recognition. They had been famous for decades. Now, Cenk and Anna, the two co-hosts of TYT, have been famous for at least, 9, 10 years potentially, whenever TYT first started, and it kept going and going. So to forego the name recognition and put someone else whom we've never heard of before, unless you were deep into their quarters, I think is a bad mistake and something that they're going to regret when Feinstein wins next year. I'm calling it now. And, I'm not saying that necessarily to be negative. I'm not saying that necessarily because I want her to win, because I don't. But you can't go in with this many mistakes. You're splitting the vote. You have someone with no name recognition when you have other options of people who are more notable. And on top of that, you have the same ideology being perpetuated by multiple people. And while you could also count that as splitting the vote, you have to remember one of the things that made Sanders very distinctive in his presidential campaign was that he was advocating for issues that weren't being suggested by other people. when you put a set of individuals with the same goals, the same ambitions, the same drive, it's a recipe for disaster. Meaning that people are going to theoretically see Feinstein as, okay, she's normal. These other ones are all sharing that those same wacky ideas that won't work. It's more likely to happen if it's more people swearing up and down about it. So I think she'll win again. I hate saying that because it's not something that ideally I want, but going off of the way they've treated this race and just the decisions that are already being made, it would take nothing short of a miracle, as Charles Kramer said of Obama's 2008 victory, which uh, ended up happening anyway, for Feinstein to be unseated by anyone currently running. And they all have their problems that are compounded either by them or by the people around them. You're going to start learning when you go and watch a lot of these campaigns, and not also the ones that are at the state level. It's usually not the candidate themselves that messes it up, but the people around them not knowing what they're doing. So, for example, someone told her, "Hey, get in this race," even though there's someone else who thinks the exact same way you do, has the same drive of, or rather, catchphrase or line of, "I'm not bought out. I'm for free college, Medicare for all, anti-war, various things that you haven't come with that person." Whoever told her that made a mistake. And it might have been one person, might have been 10 people, but they screwed up. When you make errors like this, it doesn't necessarily just negatively impact you. It impacts the candidate, impacts the campaign, impacts other people in the race. And that's kind of the problem. There's too many people in this race. They just clear somebody out. Maybe they have a chance. But right now, I'm calling it for Feinstein a year in advance. And, it is eating me up to admit that.